Here we are at the last week of Epiphany. This is this last week of celebration of the fact that God revealed himself to the world. And today we look a little bit more about how God reveals himself before we prepare for that 40 days. Before we prepare for that 40 days where we continue to make ourselves ready for the fact that we just learned that God came into the world. That we learned that he was fully man and fully God. And then we have to wrap our minds around the fact that he dies for each and every one of our sins. That he cares for us so much that he would die as that perfect ransom. And as we're in this preparation, as we're in this last week of Epiphany, and as we look at this idea of preparation, we look at a couple of people. One thing that God does for us in this time is he calls us to do hard things. That's the title of a book that I've read this past year, Do Hard Things. It's the story of a couple of teenage boys who during their course of high school decided in their junior year that they weren't going to do what they normally did. Instead, their father brought out for them books, college-level books that they were to study, challenging them. You are not just going to take it easy this summer. In the course of that, their mindset started to change. They started what they refer to as a revolution, rebelling against adolescent mediocrity. Rebelling against that idea. They got an internship that was usually only given to college seniors while they were still in high school. And they created a movement across the world where teenagers are realizing that they don't have to take the easy way out. That they don't have to be mediocre. In our passages today, we have two that we're talking about. One is King David, someone who was called by God to be the king. He went and he slayed Goliath. He went and he helped his people in that battle against the Philistines. And over time, he did better and better until the people started chanting, Saul has killed his thousands, David his tens of thousands. When God calls us to do hard things, sometimes that grinds other people the wrong way. David had to hide. Elijah was called by God to confront Ahab. He was called up as this prophet to come before Ahab and to tell him, you are doing the wrong thing. Stop it. Stop doing what you're doing. And just to prove my point, if you're not going to stop it, it's not going to rain for 3 years. Ahab searched the countryside for that 3 years, kept looking and looking and looking for Elijah, but could never find him. Until 3.5 years later, he made an appearance again, and God demonstrated his power. He was outnumbered. 450 prophets of Baal versus one Elijah. God demonstrated his power, demonstrated that he truly is God by lighting that fire. But then what happens to Elijah as we get close to this passage? He comes up against somebody named Jezebel. Elijah said, I'm Elijah the prophet. Jezebel said, so what? I'm Jezebel. I have these 400 prophets of Ashtoreth who sit at my table. They are mine. You are going to die. Elijah was afraid, but God called him to confront, to do a hard thing. The hard thing was this syncretism that Israel had fallen into. Israel didn't just come to it all of a sudden here. They had its ups and downs with syncretism. They had the worship of Baal, and they thought, hey, there's some good things in the worship of Baal. They had the worship of Ashtoreth. They said, oh, there's some good things in that. But they said, well, but we were born of Israel, and so we must worship God. So let's just take a little bit of Baal, a little of Ashtoreth, and let's just say we're worshiping God through it. That's syncretism. Taking a little piece of that and a little piece of this and putting it together. The challenge that Elijah gave to the people earlier on in this passage was, you can't do this. You can't follow Baal and God at the same time. You can't follow Ashtoreth and God at the same time. Who now is your authority? Who are you going to choose? Both Elijah and David were called to do a hard thing. A very hard thing. They both were threatened by death. And they both retreated. They got away. Elijah, sitting in the clefts of the rock, said, God, just let me die. Just let me die. God said no. It took 40 days. 40 days of retreat. And 40 days heading up to that mountain of God, to that place where Moses went and God went before him. Elijah took this retreat desperate. Desperate. Both Elijah and David could have tried to do it on their own at this point, instead of getting away. They could have tried to do it on their own. And we oftentimes think God is moving too slowly for our own pace. But the thing is, if we think God's moving too slow, and we decide to do things at our own pace, that makes you, and that made the people of Israel, fundamental atheists. Because they weren't trusting God. They were trusting themselves. Where now is your authority? If it's in yourself, that's going to be your decision. Not listen for God's voice. To crumble when things get hard. Because things get hard. I can guarantee you, if you do hard things, things are going to get tough.